Okay.
Tanisa.
Tisong.
Yeah, that Mazudi and Yam Zoala, Somala Tashi.
So first of all, hello everybody. Sorry.
And we see it Tangazo de Tasusu, Tanamjin, Tasusu Motel Chigdo, in a Tatisemo was the D. Kama needs the teaching Singaroge, Motel Shegi.
So I'm going to just sort of introduce myself a little bit because we don't have a ton of time. I'm going to keep my personal introductions to 2 minutes.
You know, Tanga any Kisa did that any Peliki or Peba in Bachi and Peliki in Bachira.
I was born in Tibet. Of course, I'm Tibetan, so I was born in Tibet.
Any Jagalu, any Nito Lula, and in a Jagalenjure. Nitolo, Nito.
Okay, I arrived in India in the year 2000.
Yeah, the Locholo Deni Talu Nishanga, Nizanga Tila, Nochu Labuche.
And so then I went to Drebalung Losaling in the southern India where I studied Buddhism for 25 years.
That was Gite to Soma Sat in the Jintag, any Geshe, Tijela, Luchik, any Nidun Sanganurati, Gemella,
So after doing the exams for the Geshe Lharampa degree, and I'll just add that they do like 5 years of exams. It's a really intensive examination process and review. After that, I went to the Gyume?
No.
Gyume.
Monastery.
I went to Gyume Monastery to study the Tantra secret mantra for a year.
Dijila da ani lojo pa ngar gumban phadu de ani doala ani yona yapo dus chochi ni ta susu ge yin zo ani labju che ni ani jela susu ge gong sheba de ani chi jaga shimba mom buchila ani pheto yu che ta ani kyorong ge de yona yapo dus ni ani jidi ge ma ke tong sus.
So after I finished the year at Gyume studying Tantra, then in order to sort of thinking about how to sort of study, can you carry the Nishin depend on and so then after I finished with Gyume, then Shide invited me to come here to help teach, as this would be a really great opportunity to teach foreigners to help other people. So I decided to come here to Shide. I accepted the invitation to come here to Shide and teach.
You know, that day, material Mombol Petona, the Hansore, the Muchi need the pay Tona, and the Chig Yabojin do Nini, Narongi, Susugu Pash, Gazette Shetuaina, Susulio, and the Labjucharagus.
So, as long as I'm able to help even one or two people, it doesn't have to be a lot of people, that's really wonderful, and I will do my best to help you and teach you as much as I am able. So that's just a very quick introduction, so stop there. So the topic for today's class is refuge, remember guys. So there's lots of ways of teaching and explaining Buddhism, and even with there's many different ways to sort of talk about and explain refuge as well. So the way I'm going to explain this is through 11 sort of through an outline of just 11 different points. Okay, so before I jump into the explanation on refuge, I'm going to say a few things. So before we talk about when we talk about Buddhism, often we really talk about the Four Noble Truths and the Two Truths. And really, before we talk about refuge, we really should talk about the Four Noble Truths a little bit.
parik tila go de to labde ni mashe bi parik tila moni chen chamsat she gores.
So really, when we think about explaining refuge, right? So if you think about the Four Noble Truths, you have the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering. And then after that, you have the truth of the cessation of suffering and the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. So you have the Four Noble Truths. So really the place where we should talk about refuge is in between these. So truth of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and then we should talk about refuge. That's a really good way to approach it.
Yina da tise mombuje yo mara chichin da chuzo ge demba jigo kola kazagala ani yo ani jongse wi jere ti indi ani ta tinyi go paril yo ba jagu tone ngaro ge shigis
Kedi
demba jigi ni paritla yo ba de ani jaja cheni ani ngaro ge shigis
kengi demba shigi go la shigi mara
da de chiag tiset ndwa.
Yeah, so ideally we would be able, if we had more time, we would go through the first noble truths first, the first two truths for Aryas first, and then talk about refuge. But maybe you guys have had some introduction to these two before, and so what we're going to do today is really just talk about refuge. But I wanted to just point that out, that really it's really good to understand the first two noble truths first.
Yeji tinyi parit shaw go te ta ga dunga de ba konjo de ba ngode sa shewudwa gode sena karare sene twa to yongur gode sa te karare labde sa te karare semunde sambala tinyi iga de chukuncho chagur
chukuncho. So when we look at the Four Noble Truths, so remember we have the truth of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, the truth of the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. So the third and fourth noble truth of the cessation and the path to cessation, these are actually really of the three jewels. These are the Dharma jewel, the actual Dharma jewel.
Ni mona chukunjo kunyi di chukunjo re semunde mona chukunjo sa chukunjo jibi chudi sagasong re semunde ani dacha gi tomba gasong re seni ani sonji kunjo de shego mona danda gode to labde ni di chukunjo re la wara mona chukunjo jibi chudi ani karare se de oti dacha gi tomba gi sonjo re somba res ni dacha gi tomba di ani So if
we think about the truth of cessation, the truth of the path of cessation as being the Dharma jewel, right? So of the three jewels, right? The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Right? You have the Dharma jewel, right? And so then the teachings that allow one to understand and practice the truth of cessation and truth of the path, right? If you think about that, then who taught that? Well, it's the Buddha that taught that, right? So then you have the Buddha jewel, right? So the Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel.
Then una chukunjo de sonje ga sombaye na chukunjo sewa de si gela yore semunde konza sugi gela yore sedi ani gindi kunjo gi gela yore sedi ani gindi kunjo de shewo res.
The sula the simgi gyur.
Danung gode do labde se ati kandachi gi gyula yore.
Kandachi. Oh, the kandachi. Okay. So you have the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, right? So the Dharma jewel being the truth of cessation, the truth of the path. The Buddha is the person that taught the teachings that allow someone to actualize the third and fourth noble truth. And then what is the truth of the Gindan Gunchok is the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, the Sangha jewel. So the Sangha jewel are the people that have actually listened to these teachings and sort of manifested them in their minds. Does that make sense?
What kozosam chongrab jena tatili jiresra. Tini tangazo dinmechi any deep jachi ni mashe wondi sambala susugi tawanda yona tadi tajanola wala chetni and trochisra.
So while I'm explaining this, of course, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to just go ahead and ask your questions. If you want to ask them online, what just happened? If you guys online want to ask them, you're welcome to put them in the chat. I'm going to add that I may not notice if you just put it in the chat, so you also may just have to sort of interrupt me because sometimes I'm too busy thinking about translating to watch the chat. But yeah, please ask questions.
Ani ta konili twa to jiuna ani kozosani yung hasu twa leshi ani ma 아니 셰시 아니 트와텔리 제시 제 담아데노 당아조 요 아니 초다지 제니 아니 요소소소 트와지 요나 아니 티궁고리 지 두바이나 소소게 콘셰바텔라 랍사 트와지 레요나 아니 디노라 아니 츠지 라바이나 당아로게 콘시바데 아니 셰초군두스.
So of course you two here in the room, please, if you have questions, just go ahead and ask them. This is really can be a discussion, and you're welcome to stop and ask questions at any time. And of course, whatever questions you have, I will answer them as I am able to answer them.
마도 지 몸보지 마셰 생아부서 타마드는 트와텔레 유성데 몸몸부지기 공고마 셰약 총 고인바데 템바지니 트와도 소용 티그라데
Yeah, so of course if I just keep talking and then you wait to the end, you would probably forget your question. So please ask them.
onde ta dang 저 sabjip chaching ta sajip chaching de ma lo mogo ta chiri de lo shi de jeshi cheni du is.
So I'm not going to go through each of the 11 points of the outline here, but we'll go and we'll not go through them beforehand. What I'll do is as we go through them, they'll come up.
ta de tanga zo tombo changru chegu bi ani garse na jimse sen nga zo changru chegu res la gora ta changru chen na ona changru chewal jimse gari res odi.
So the first one here is sort of what is the reason one goes for refuge, right? So we say, oh, you must take refuge. This is really important, right? So why? What is the reason that one has to take refuge?
Yena chamru del chato jinse mombo yore tinone tangi yuni chikshi gi isra.
So of course there's many reasons, there's many qualities, right? There's many reasons why you go for refuge, but we'll just talk about one for the moment.
ngaro choge jala ngomto tha to mi kombo thaba do 30 sonji yi kombo thaba jiwra odi gi gyo giwi li sewate ngaro choge jala nyonyo ji ma to yo mare niba ya haju chungju res.
So in our mind streams, in our minds, right? We have so we have very little. We have accrued very little karma that will allow us to have sort of higher rebirths of the gods in the human realms, and also, especially to achieve things like liberation or the state of a Buddha, right? So the karma in our mind streams and our continuums for these positive revolts is very small and very weak.
ani magiwi lit ngaro songi jala ta hang so mombo tab chimbo yimba ani kyo chima za ta ke lemba yin kyo chima la ngeso sam la tan ruwa pe jasha gyad ngiba na chati wes.
But on the other hand, the strength of the sort of karma from negative deeds or misdeeds in our mind stream and our continuum is very, very strong, is very, very powerful, right? And so if you believe in past and future lives, right, then you would say, oh, I'm definitely going to go to a bad rebirth because of there's so much negative karma, that is in our mind stream.
Tindel somlo tone tang kyo chima sa ji yoba yena ta tel nguni tone ani ngeso so le kiwa lona ta nguni ngeso so ge dinga to so yo samni an dela ani ha jo ge jikta chi ni ta nguni tel duna nga kibu yong sa mara tel ta thargo du ta tel tharsa thawala kyab ji je go du kyab ji je won de chamba o songi nya chigli songi le ji mundu samne ensemble ti tong gores.
So again, for those people that believe in past and future lives, right? So you look at this and you look at these bad migrations, which we could say are the being born as an animal, hungry ghost, or hell realm. But anyways, really bad migrations, right? And so you look at this and you think, oh, well, I'm definitely going to go to one of these terrible rebirths. I'm going to have you think, over and over again about the suffering of these different type of negative rebirths. And so through contemplating that, you develop this great fear about not wanting to go to these kind of terrible rebirths. And then you think, okay, well, what can help me? What can keep me from going to these negative rebirths? And really the only thing that is able to save us, that is able to help us, is the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha.
Oh, dear, that dice mombuji druaza. That didn't that song gil capson dosona, and dear song be chudo. The charge the damgege gindedio. Ani capche chogundu sani tozo saula ani yichibi gune ani chamro chewade chamro chepi jemseres.
So this is we're sort of going to move a little quicker than I thought because we're running through time. But so then if you think about why we want to take refuge, the reason for that is we're taking refuge in the teachings that the Buddha taught, and we're taking refuge in the people that have used those teachings to transform their mind stream, right? And we're doing this to avoid this suffering of these negative rebirths. So then the next section here is, so we talk about there being 3 refuges, or 3, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, right? So why are there 3? What is the reason for there being 3?
Pena Geshe chulu to Hindi ki chulu ta to so no la kyawi te la chi ma to sha ma ra jiti ko ba bo sa to an hawum chi sa to o to so kyawi sha ni tile shi and kyam ke yo ma ra sa ni so res.
So for example, in the other religions, right, like Hinduism or Christianity or Judaism, right, you really just have the creator God, or the I'm not sure in Hinduism you would say the creator God exactly, but you have really just one God that you're taking refuge in, for example. So why do we posit 3 refuges?
Yena nomba sonje ba ge cham sam shawa dal jinse pi tin shawres example gun ping gun kar shawres na ani member ji to ani ming ji to ne yo sa gun pi jan shawres.
So we can the Buddha talked about this in terms of an example, right? So we can give this example that you have the example of a doctor, medicine, and the sort of the nurses or the assistants to the doctor.
Ani di tang aro so nepa za ta bu shibo ji yo na ko tawa la tabshi kare re tabshi tisam to mena nepa de tatu mares.
So if you think about us having this really grave, this really serious illness, right? If we do not have some kind of medicine, there's no way to heal, to recover, to fix this illness.
Ani member ya boji yo min de member yena na za daga never de tatu mara. Member ya boji yo bachi min de member yena ani tatu mares.
So I think I messed up just a second ago. So if you're very sick and you don't find a good doctor, right, to continue the example. So if you're very sick and you don't find a good doctor, then there's no way to recover. If you're very sick and you found a good doctor, but you don't get the medicine, there's also no way to recover.
Ani me do ta ka sonji di ta ka me do member ni di you neo de member yena yo ani never di hajun za ta bu yi zong ani ya lo do kala te do ta do so ma tege member yena ani yo ko ya situ ma
So also, right, because we're very ill, we're very sick, we can't get up, we can't feed ourselves, we have all these problems, right, in this example. So even if we have a doctor and we have the medicine, if we don't have the nurses, the assistants to help us, right, it's very difficult to recover from this illness.
Today, ani ngazo sonji ngazo dino le chamro se ngazo chamke te la sonji ko jo chu ko jo ginde ko jo sab jani sonji kum jo di mana ani je du tu jim ko ko sombe chu de ngazo kelem de mle cha dora ti chu ke male na ti nyam selin ke ko konsa di ke male cha res.
So in this example, right, if you think about you have the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? So the Buddha, being the doctor, but here if you don't have the Buddha, if you don't sort of have faith in the Buddha, then you don't have the Dharma jewel, right? You don't have the teachings of the Buddha. And if you don't have trust in the teachings of the Buddha, or if the teachings of the Buddha aren't real, then you don't have the what we would call the Sangha jewel, right? So you don't have the people that have taken the teaching and transformed their minds with it. So you can see how the 3 are necessary sort of within each other. So this is why we would talk about there being 3 jewels, right? Because you have the doctor, the medicine, and the nurses, right? So you have those 3 things that are related: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
Tiseki chimbi tachi sha chawo ji shegina tisekro mando ma to chedon neni shipche neji jena ponjala deni tamje mene tempa chawa trsani sonji ko sombo chi rui denga chaki musela ni ji dupa jela pumni se tsichiwa rui denga sana duwa smshi zoge denga zo ngim gola laba shani tawa yores ne yo mares ani ni gi jegi yonde to ni chola te was ni te yo mares ni konsombi chudi susugi labjo jeni 아니 디 옌도 메 따치 제 디니 디 수수가 냠슬리고 그래서 손직 디수.
So there's a very famous quote that I can't reproduce exactly, but I think I can basically get the right idea here. Is this idea that the Buddha has said that I cannot like reach down and save you, or I cannot transfer my realizations to you, right? What I've done is I've taught the Dharma, but it's up to you to actually take this Dharma, to listen to it, to really investigate it, really check it out, really decide if it's true, and then practice it, right? That's how you actually save yourself.
아니 굴아 가시 굴 칠리군도아 칠리네 어딘데기 따투 그래서 따투.
So like some people talk about putting water around the head and that purifying the body, but you know from the Buddhist perspective that doesn't help.
원하다 점도 디마시온데 삼바데레 삼바 점도 ngo소와서 디레.
So then we So the third section, so that was why, is we have the why go for refuge, so we have sort of why are there three, and then we have sort of ngosungwa, it's like recognizing each of the three.
Tio ani goboldo dog kemro dense balel karsena sonji chudo gende na taban doban nam kemsene sonyo ta sonji konjo chukumcho ani gende kumcho doso ani taba tobala ani kyam udres
Tange go chok
sonji kumcho chukumcho gende kumcho dino didwa sonji chudo gende na taban doban nam kemseti di tsoma lamogo chi
didwa songe chutang gende ni Okay, so there's a quote from Nagarjuna that basically says, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, these are the things that people who want to be liberated take refuge in.
어디 점섬도 다티치 다원나 점섬요나 점섬세야디 간다레 손지 꿈쇼라나 가라레 추꿈쇼라나 가라레 긴디 꿈쇼세야디 가라레 손디 지금 못시오.
So what is really, when we say the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, really what do we mean by these terms, right? What is the definition or the essence, or really what is the actual meaning of these terms, right?
원나다 손지 군쇼세야디 가라레 추꿈쇼세야 가라레서 대다 문이 전에 손지 군쇼게 뭐 마샹원데 잠발라 아니 다 도도다 샤바이나 교 그제 요데 건도 덴바시라 손지라고 그랬어. 교 그제 교 세지와 교 촌이 메사 용때 요스조바도 덴바.
So if we talk about the Buddha, really what is the Buddha? To say it very, very simply, the Buddha is the being who has eradicated all faults and has acquired all positive virtues, all good virtues.
아니 데데 아니 가서 단다데 정도지 비짐세 정도 ngodra 아니 정도 ngod 마셔도 정도 ngol라고 로 가르즈나 디콜 정도 ngod 정도 지니 투사르다 고 네 정도 ngod 로님 고와트 지니 딜레지 벨리 바고 조살레 바토 드나 타다리 기업을 비상바테 안디디 다 정도 ngod 코로 도도 코로 샤바이나 아니 그 로님 고와도 녀석이 등알라 지시 짜니 딜리 겹이 네바데 다 손지 코나라 마토 시 슬라요 모두 섬 사운로 돈니 딜라야 겹슨 도아딜라 아니 점도라 버렸어.
So when we talk about refuge, what do we really mean by refuge? What is this gyamdro is the Tibetan, right? This act of refuge, right? Well, it's like the
로님 코와도 녀석이 등알이 지시 짜니 딜리 겹이 니바
Okay, so when we look at all of the suffering of cyclic existence in the three bad migrations, right? And so from that we generate all of this sort of terror and fear. So there's nothing but the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha jewel, that really have the ability or the power to save us from this suffering. And so then recognizing that, we sort of go for refuge in them to save us from the suffering of cyclic existence and the bad migrations.
원한데 옛날에 정도 제거라 이나 정도 제와라 간다치니 정도 써야 돼 가지고 gel라 끼고래서디 그 간다치에 나가서 제메나 디범 존이 좀 Chamdo Jala Chebala, Chamdo Jingi to go, Chamdo la Jichi go, Jetila Nivres.
So if that is what refuge is, right, and we want to generate this mind, well, everything that if you want the fruit, if you want the result of something, you have to generate its cause, right, or the conditions for the result of that, right? So the cause of refuge, we say that there are two causes of refuge. There are two things that lead to this mind of refuge.
Tati Chamdo Jingi. Yeji Garsana, Maroso Jala, Dunga Yuba, the Simshi Kandachina, Koyala, Dunga Yuba, Telan Geshe, Taba Chikton, and the Jow, the Tinde Geshe Taba de, and Mebazo Tonketo, Tel, and Mebazonketi, Sonji Nachi, and so Tela Yichibi Yichisina, or the.
So there's two causes, right? We say fear and faith, right? So you look at all of the suffering around us of all sentient beings, right? You look at the suffering of our existence, and seeing that suffering, you generate fear, you generate terror, you're really scared of that kind of suffering, right? And so then you think, okay, well, the only thing that actually is able to truly free me from this suffering is the Buddha and the teachings of the Buddha, right? So through seeing that, you have faith in the Buddha, or trust in the Buddha, right? Confidence in the Buddha, that the Buddha is able to deliver you from that suffering. So you have these two causes of refuge, fear and faith, or fear and trust.
Pechashana, Naruto, Jitindino, Mutasola, Kanga Chimbu, Tewon de Zambala, Jini, any Kanga de Setola, Majela, and Chapchugures. Pechashana, Naruto, Muchila, Kanga Chimbuji, Terra, Jipenjoyana, Garin, the Chiku, Kanga Chimbuji, Tebaina, and the Susukanga de Lias, any Dotavla, and Mishimbala, Chapchugures.
So for example, like me, for example, if I had like this really big problem, welcome, there's water in the little boiler thing in the back if you want hot water or tea. Yeah. For example, if I had a really big problem, like if something really bad happened to me, or I had a really big problem, what I would do is I would then go look for help with a friend or someone else to like help me, right, with this problem.
Ani tauni di meba sogo du mato meba mazona du mundu sone sono ti tongore mato jishi taba zamki jishi taba de mena ani ko chaptomba bo sonjila yichile mares.
So really if you look around, if you do not have this sort of fear that arises from really observing the condition around us and seeing all the suffering of you could say the suffering of all the sentient beings, or the suffering of sort of going to having these bad rebirths. But if you don't have this mind that really looks around you and really sees this suffering very clearly, and generates a mind that's really scared, that's really worried about experiencing that suffering, right? Without that mind, you won't really ever take refuge. You won't generate this mind of refuge.
And it's not Sonjila Tabayo, not Sonji Gisadri, yes, and Susuki Jalan Jita Manayon, and it jumped on Mares.
So, right, if you say, oh, I'm a Buddhist, oh, I do these practices, I'm a Buddhist, but if you are not really afraid of the suffering of samsara, then you don't really have refuge, and you're not really a Buddhist.
No Chugushoni Shebayana, Chukanda Shebayana, Jamdru. Yeah.
So whatever kind of Buddhist practice you do or Buddhist study you do, right, without this really sincere mind of refuge, it's not truly Buddhism.
Ani duji sabye gabdi gabjawa inandra ani ngazo jeni to so gawa inandra mani dewa inandra gare yena ngola sonji kunjo chu kunjo ginde kunjo sayati ti kandraji yemme ngu tebi toni ani chu mani
So all of these practices you might do, like Vajrasattva, you might do sort of shine, like concentration, single-pointed practice. You could do mani, like you could do omani pema hung, mani pani pung, right? All of these things that you could do that we do all the time, right? If we do not generate this really deep mind first of refuge into the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, right, then none of it really is that beneficial. But if before you do these kind of practices, if you generate really a true mind of refuge, then just one Om Mani Padme Hum becomes incredibly powerful and beneficial.
Ni jangdo yi jichi ni ba ta demba da ta jangdo yi mu ba cha so sa de ta jangdo yi mu ba cha so de la ta te se ngor go sar go ta de ta do do shi sha ra
to shi ya de ya po yore
ani jangdo yi mu ba cha to kan da san na tombo su su ro ni di ma de ani de ni su su ge ta de ze la nam kha ge ti tin pa ga re yo san na ti chen bu ji yo ba sa lo tong ti ten de la 수수기 공리 디 수수들이 파과요 노시 라마요 다가로 파과니 되고
오케이 디 강라
수수들이 되오라
땡라
지금 군파 남갈다 수수리야 툴리샤 라마디디 공리 파 아니 파과니 되고 선에서 동고 디하고서 다 수수 니데 다다가 디 되오라 니가 공리 파 라마기 트지 요바치 트디 텐들라 mido pema ki den di ra mido pema ki den la nimi den ki den da dawi den o tindi chi yuba dawi den do ani lama ji yure samne ti tong pres
nga so dindri yure di yang na
dindi mara su chu de pa dindi de ati mara
okay ni
ga pa kun
okay so now we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of visualization, like sort of what you should imagine, right, when you think about refuge. Visualization is very important in this tradition, right? So I was trying to clarify there for a second if we were facing each other, if it was like this, but it's like this. So what you imagine is this really beautiful big throne, and then on top of the throne, the so there's a throne, the meto pema, okay, the dawakabo.
Die dendo ani nimide
anyway.
Die dendo dawa dawa ge den odi die konda de ani susuge lama sete yo na tai lama ta ngara chin jawar go che samno ton
okay
odi ta ton
so you have the throne above your head you're imagining, and then you have the lotus flower, then you have what we would say is a sun disk and a moon disk, and then sitting on this is all the throne, right? And sitting on top of this, this is above your head, and you're both facing forward. You have your root guru or root lama. So for example, my root lama is His Holiness. So I would imagine His Holiness sitting on this throne above my head, both of us facing forward.
Dindiya saunu tani ta laba yi chola siwre sena ani tandanga so jidi chama gumbo laba yi chola jidi chama gumbo yo wache te chola ani karsena ngaso 자시 조지스니 도초니 마 아니 초송조 주라 어디 마음만티니 용게기 딘데기 아니 하도 아니 숨바부 콘사트소 디초니 마 숨마 아니 데고선데
the Jetsun Jamba Gombo Tang, the Shimatisier, the Hlatang, the
Yuri.
So on this side, the Lama. So next to us, on our right side, we also should imagine the Maitreya, right, which is the future Buddha, and then all of the great teachers and the sort of yidams and deities that are associated with that lineage. You would imagine sort of off to our right side.
아니 라바 유초로 세우르스나 라바 유초로 지진 잠비용요
잠비용
라바 어디 지진 잠비용 지 데니 자모타지 톰바니기 아니 초송게 고볼도라소바 아니 데도 할라소바 아니 디니마 아니 지유선 데유선 상로 동그레스
and so then on the left side, so you have on this side you have Maitreya, on this side you have Manjushri. So Manjushri is associated with what we would say is the sort of profound wisdom view, right? So you have Manjushri, you have Nagarjuna, and all of the people that are associated with this sort of the view of this profound view of emptiness, and then all of the associated sort of gods and goddesses and deities and things like that. If you're not used to we use the word God in Buddhism, it's got a very different meaning than most Christian or other religious contexts, but it is the literal translation of the word.
아니 수수기 잡초라 아니 자와 두집초 jawa dujipcho on the jingni tege ani ta songi di ma chalap ma tinjo jura o ji didin du chena taba tawre didon dide chena songi gre se ya dinde ma chalap ko jiba jura jawa dujipcho tinjo jawa dujipcho se wa de yo ngak choni lama jire
okay
o de job choni songkoni ani jiu ba de ba jiban ma songi san ma yong yo de kizo jablo di yo
and so behind us we have the practitioners and teachers of the tantra lineage, right? And so you have the whole lineage of the tantra practitioners and teachers behind you that you visualize back there with their associated deities.
Teni sosoge deni tsula ani garakho warasan ani sosoge sai lama do tedo nyambe sosoge ta teba yosage lama do ani soma yetam do so dige tilpa tini
so you visualize all this and you're all facing forward, and so what you visualize in front of you is all of the yidams and deities and teachers that you have really respect or faith in, right? You visualize them in front of you facing you.
Ani digan tani tadi solo sono karton gresena dipa to maomba to tata wasena dibi songi maombi songi tata we songi to soge ani kwani deu sono tongres.
And so then surrounding all of this you imagine all of the Buddhas of the past, present and future, right? So you imagine all of these countless Buddhas of the past, present and future are also sort of surrounding you.
Di tani ta garasena duarti samche tamche ta ji ngo susu ge ngo imba paju ina paju logo ta susu de jini tsu de yo ba samno ton ngo de la stilo de imba i naba tonda nguni de soma gi ma shi to kusena gora geje shi ba ani songi ge soma do ni shi ba de ji imba samno ton gores.
So you imagine, so then beyond that, right, all of the Buddhas of all the three times, right, then you imagine all the sentient beings, right, so all of the sentient beings, so even all of the animals and insects and everything come. But in this situation, you want to imagine them in a form that's able to actually hear and understand and practice the teachings, right? So you want to imagine all sentient beings being here in a form that's able to actually practice Buddhism.
Tindeji samlo ton seni ta roni gi ani garresena simche tam chege dunga di sevi chedo ronya jobo garsena sonji go du tenda sonji wate susugi dena tudong gulo yoage lama di solo ani lama to sonji to chu to gende to soma to je slai ani ngazo chak to bi ni ba yo mare kozo genga kyawi kyogo samsong ti tongres.
So having sort of set up this whole visualization, what you should think is that I need to, like all sentient beings are suffering so much, so I really, really need to achieve Buddhahood, achieve this state of Buddhahood so that I can be of benefit to all of these sentient beings and help all of these sentient beings be free from suffering. And so then you think, okay, well, really other than, you've got your root lama and all of these Buddhas that you're visualizing, right? So the only beings that are able to help you achieve that goal are your lama and the Buddhas and all of that. So you generate this mind that really takes refuge in them as the only thing that can help you achieve Buddhahood in order to save all sentient beings from suffering.
Tinde solo tong de chambala ani kone lama rongi chawi lama to tene tigam khoryu ge ani giwi shi ta gasa galyu ge to suma ge ani nyinga ni wo ma thuni wolanaagura woma tuni simchetam chela wogi ma poni
ngatung yungi changi thinglama
on de shoji chamjinga ji chotu sumaywa
kerang yang de ma tuni
wodi lama san tuni yana lama ma tuni ani ngasola po nga do nga che dini thala simcheta chela ma wodi poni ani dingar tham che ani taso sansalo tongres.
So at this point, then, what you do is you imagine from the heart center of all of these great beings, right? So all of the Buddhas and Yitams and all of the Lama, right? All of these great beings that you visualize, you imagine light, bursting forth, coming forth, being emitted from the heart center of these great beings, and that light comes and fills feels you, but also covers and fills all sentient beings, right? And so what you should really think is, as that light, covers all sentient beings, then all of our suffering, all of our problems have been purified.
Tindis solo toni ta dinga thamche de jo ani sengge tela cham sam sonji nyachi ma to mundusra ani diga sombi chudigi ani ngazol ta roba chegres dia sombi ginde digo ngazol roba chegre ti indi cham tesa ma to nga ani tege me son sono tombi toni ani sojib chudum sojib chonala chonje pardo dani chosumchi dagi jisu jibi sonom jimdola pe sojin dribor show seni ani chamro de do samche yita ani
So thinking this, right, what you should think then is, right, so you have all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, right, and they've taught the Dharma, right, and so they've taught this teaching that can help us. And then not only that, but then you've got the Sangha, right, that have actualized these teachings. So other than these three things, there's really nothing that's able to help us, to free us from suffering and to help other beings. So really holding that mind, really thinking that mind, right, then you recite the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer. Oh, what is it in English? I've forgotten the English. The Buddha, the Dharma. I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I can't believe I've forgotten this in English.
I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, to the Sangha until I get enlightened.
Yeah.
And I practice all the paramitas and the perfections in order to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Let's see. Let's see, what is it?
Karala.
I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I'm enlightened by the power of these. Yeah, so by the merits of my generosity and other perfections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So I take a refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. By my merits of generosity and so forth, or it's basically the so forth is the other perfections, the 6 perfections. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all transmigratory beings. So that's a really short summary of this whole mind.
Ta dije ani geba tat dini mal geba de tanda dio dije shira ma so de jo jigdegi ra ani chausun ruwi chardre ta chausun ruwi sabde kandar se na rondo jengi rongi tomba se na susugi chapchesa de do jengi chapchesa de teni chebra shiwi toni ani chamru chibures 반항아서 니로 정루 가서 정루 교순루이 철롱도 겸순루이 철사야데 나로서 나인다 nomba차에서 nomba기 손지 겹대고라 아니 힌두도 도서서는 지대 고바보 겹치고라 오그 지대 고바보를 연대 드리지도 손지라 연대 드리지도 디길 켜번 드리도선 디 10이 돈이 아니 손지라 겹순루고래서
So then sort of it's like the way of going for refuge, but here the point is really that you should really go through refuge by understanding the qualities of the 3 jewels, right? And understanding the qualities of the other sources of refuge in the world, such as the refuges of the other religions, and seeing the refuges of the 3, seeing clearly what the qualities of the 3 jewels are, you choose to go to refuge for them.
Ta jamroge labchatila ani gobadra jamroge labchatila kariyurasena dabi labchato gabe labchasne niures.
So when we talk about taking refuge, then there are these sort of refuge precepts, these things you sort of promise to do after taking refuge. And so there's what we would call in English proscriptive and prescriptive precepts, things you shouldn't do and things you're supposed to do.
저도 코로나로 가르쳐서 수수의 납자서도 도모의 납자서는 이시하고 다 수수의 납자들라 더비 납자지도 가비 납자지 니워 아니 가비 납자들라 사고를 더비 납자들라 사고.
So there's also, we would say, there's sort of common and sort of specific or uncommon precepts, and here there's the proscriptive and prescriptive precepts, the jupe labcha tetso the sosugi labcha.
Sosugi labcha.
Yeah, so the proscriptive
sonji kunjo chukunjo ginde kunjo lani chap susu la labcha ri.
Oh, this doesn't.
Sonji kumchola lapchachi chu kumchola lapchachi gidi kumchola lapchari river.
Ah, okay. So there are prescripts. There are precepts. There are precepts for each of the three jewels, right? So there's a precept for the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, right? So the word is Sosogi Lapcha in Tibetan, so it's like sort of specific individual precepts for each of the three jewels, and then there's sort of common precepts for all of them.
Ni sonje la chapsun duni chula chapsun mandwa. Adi sonje la chapsun duni jite koba boje la chapsun mandwa.
Yeah. So the precept for the Buddha jewel is you take refuge in the Buddha and you don't take refuge in other worldly gods.
Ani chula chapsun duni ani garasana tanda sonje la chapsun duni jite koba boto so chapsun mandwa chane sonji gi kuzu yinche. And so
then in terms of the Dharma jewel, right, what you should do is all of these images of the Buddha, we should really respect them as if they were the Buddha.
Ani ta chula chausun droni ani karche goresena mazo sinje jela ani no sepo no bamache otiche gores no bamache chula chausun droni.
Yeah, okay. And so then also the next the precept in terms of the Dharma jewel is that we should abandon harming sentient beings.
Ani gindela chausun droni ani gindela chausun droni til jen garsena simba matik chela so bala ani traumatic bahas.
So then in terms of taking refuge in the Dharma jewel, what we should do is abandon being around negative people that denigrate the Dharma.
Yena ta mombo chila ngaso matik pato sin chro pato zolo traumatic bahasa de musar yosa gaji ki todik chogres.
Good.
Ngaso matik chi sa de chro pato zonyom da topodik chog mar la gura. Yena ti sonji ge son de nguni patana yo kezar kashi kuwa kinza le gura. Tinde mai pan jawar buchi da jina
So the way this literally is written in Tibetan, it's like don't associate with or be friends with sort of non-Buddhist essentially, right? And so that's if we take that literally, that can be kind of strange. And of course, if you take the example of His Holiness has made an incredible. The Dalai Lama has made an incredible effort to actually reach out to other religions and talk to other people, right? So we shouldn't maybe take this at its literal meaning, right? That's why I translated it as not associate with people that denigrate the Dharma. Makes it a little clearer.
So
when we talk about the benefit of taking refuge is that we become a Buddhist, essentially.
Ani damba thamji ji tending ke pasote ani damba dilla ani genye ke damba gisar ke damba gelon ke damba nyeni ke damba ani nga ke damba chonje sambi damba sani tende ke damba mombo chure to soma ke ani ting chagres ting zena saje ta
yeah. So when we talk about Buddhism, of course, there's lots of different kind of levels of vows you can end up taking, like bodhisattva vows, tantric vows. You could take the different monastic vows, right? But all of these vows really rely on these refuge and the refuge precepts as their foundation, as their basis.
And
also, if you take refuge well, then these harm bringers and these evil spirits and these people, these things that want to harm you will not be able to harm you.
Ani susuge gong samba de dondan raptwa chekres susuge leka kandaji cheba ino lekati raptwa.
And so then whatever sort of action you try to accomplish, whatever your goals are, you'll have success in being able to accomplish those.
Ani jeng kijab cheba sawon ta kandaji na da susule gabo chawat ni ani ronje yongu res.
So then and also just sort of naturally through taking refuge that people will respect you and like you and be attracted to you.
Oh God, tachi tise mompochi ani chaso.
Sorry, that was a lot of time. Geshe prepared this really wonderfully extensive notes, but of course we didn't have time, so we sort of had to run through them a bit.
Kamanga zuta tise chumagi tise kero che and kamanga gonna try.
Please ask questions now for a few minutes if anybody has questions.
You were saying like when you visualize, you put your root lama here, and you say here it's His Holiness. Does it mean that everybody has a different root lama?
Kyungi dingatsoti mikcha dingatsoti sang dikorati gamjo muna di ngatsot sawe lama ngatsot sawe di dengere ngat di kirangi sawe lama di gonsochoki ini miso solo jiksena di sawe lama shimba yorebe
musiki ta nga rajina jawar bochi chata susu ki sawe lama savati susu ki kya ngama ni sawe lama riri yor yana susu ki tu se di sono la raligo ngaro ina da jawar mo chai lama tengu re di ngi chai lama ngui mi di tanda haku u mare ti no je nge pe ji sha wora sera la ngi mon chawa ji yor chawa di chama jamger ni picha ta gidi mo so pichu ina picha ma shi ni ani chama jam ni de wor jela nebalela ani ge taga lama ka se lama jiyor kosa sonchu jige drone ani koyabo shiba chani desum ani yage chatro se chatro se na shenao no deni gamjam de o draba to bato so tombo letsege o de chayores
so yes, everyone has their own. Everyone, like my root lama maybe is His Holiness, and everyone sort of has their own history from past lives, right? So your root lama is this person who's been guiding you over many lives, and actually most of us may not actually know who our root lama is, right? So maybe His Holiness isn't actually my root lama, right? But he's the one I have in this life. But we all have. Ideally, your root lama is this person that's been guiding you over many lives, but depending on the amount of merit you have in this life, you may or may not know them or recognize them or meet them. And so there was an example of at Sarah there was a monk who was not particularly known for their study, but they would go and basically were just cleaning up all the time, sweeping up all the time, and then the Gushote Karichini said, and the
Sarah ni bijamshi ani dini tondro nimachi tondro nibale duni nibale la Manjur Muchiva. Manjur Muchi, Teni, Manjur Muchi, the Chusoni, and Kohoptica, Tawaseni, and Koyapachayores.
So this monk who was at Sarah and who wasn't very studious or wasn't known for studying was just sort of cleaning up all the time. I think the point being that he was accumulating lots of merit helping out. Then one time went to Nepal and just by chance ran into Mingyur Rinpoche, and then through this connection with Mingyur Rinpoche, this just sort of immediately his practice flowered, and then went off and did practice in the mountains and had really great realizations. So that can happen.
Susuke Yinji Minji Yawarumbuchi Rina, that Susuke Tabatano, Tendeche by the Chichin, Lama Yesaba, Chichin, Susuke Tilla, Kiji Shengenola. Some sort of Susu like Geshe, the Chima to machine, Susu Sabgad, Yon, the Mombuji Lepa in Tichung, Lama Yesaba.
Yeah, so it could be His Holiness, it could be not. It's not. You don't have to have this incredible faith in His Holiness or not, right? That isn't necessarily, but it's just this idea that sometimes some people teach and it really just hits you really deeply. It's hard. Some people can say, some teachers sometimes might say one word, right, and it really transforms your mind, and that maybe that person is your lama, right? If you have that kind of experience.
How was
that? Was that a good answer?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Please go.
I was thinking about to have real fear to get the retreat. Maybe most of the people, they are more fear not for suffering, but for dying.
The tiktak kia ki gola di kongi samotang geri sung yini chene jikchena ngatso di mangchewa jikchena di Namgyal la tiktak sheja shegi yomare nguni chene chiwa la shegi yore di chiwa midak jikchena di tiktak mambo chegi yore
손 직자 사야지 마셔야지 제소 디레스 녀소 성기 르께바 있는 성도 수수 시와디라 수수 신이 가을 두고래서는 성로 동원데 뭔지야 신이 나 요 말을 기 지우래 신이 나 하이 두고래 금초리 이따가 가서 지데 고바보도 소리 신이 지데 고바보고 건조래 나야 보체나 나 하이 두고래 나야 보마지는 나니어 두래서 남게 지우래 근데 말은 아주 시와이나 내가 단단디노래 야보즈 제바이는 치치마라 요는 멀리르부치 타고래 요나 살기그래서 성노티 동거래 요나 녀속삼을 끼그래서 라고 오나 녀속삼을 끼소나 구조 요 등엄한테 용공도 말라 끼소나요 나조 단단 가서 좀 등어도 다 도서 소말이 탈고도 딜리 타와라 아니 지 제지 요미요 따고라 제 가루 선디 동부 소스 지라마기나 딜 탐도 끼고 말했어 어디
So yeah, I mean, of course, from the Buddhist perspective, what we're talking about is this idea of many lives, of not only just dying, but then dying, and then where do you go? Where are you reborn, right? In these bad migrations. So in the world, there's of course we have people. Many people just think you die and you're done, right? That there's nothing. You also have people who believe that you die, and if you based on God judges you and you either go to a heaven or you go to a hell, right? That's a very common belief. But from the Buddhist perspective, right, we have to really look and understand and think about this idea of the different kinds of rebirths, right? So we could be reborn. You have the hell. You could be reborn as one of what we call bad migration. So the hell beings or animals or hungry ghosts. And if you're born in one of these, you're just sort of suffering constantly. It's really terrible. You could be born as a person, and you're back sort of where you are right now, right? If you accumulate lots of virtue and you're fortunate, you could have what we would call a fortunate rebirth, like a very precious human rebirth, which I think most of us have, which is a birth where we have the ability to practice the Dharma. But really, the fear we're supposed to develop is the realization of this sort of suffering cycle of always being reborn in these birth states that are going to lead to constant sort of suffering and dissatisfaction, and then looking at wanting to cut that. But if we don't develop the mind that is afraid of this cycle, we won't really develop the mind that wants to get out of it. Did that answer your question?
제동아주 시와를 짜게지도 시와디 짜게데 몽보지 디 젤지 무시게 가려움요 하모고니 짜게 몽치저디 디레스.
So people that are really afraid of death, mostly what they are afraid of is that they don't know what comes after death. And so that's really the unknown they're afraid of often.
농비촌에서나 저런 치나 기와 치만 로사요라다. 기와 치만 딘디지요라다. 배차샤나 기와 나마 땡겐도아스. 기와 나마 땡게 디게 나 기와 나마 지지지레 무무무레스니 신게 도아스.
기와 땡겐.
디게 시와인서 기와 나마 요나 기와 치마 요바디 잡두고레스. 리바가 도고라.
So of course, from the Buddhist perspective, we think about past and future lives, right? And so there are people, for example, that do remember their past lives, right? And so from understanding that people remember their past lives, you can sort of extrapolate that, of course, then there are these future lives, and think about where are you actually going to be going in these future lives.
Tinde izo ani suso lama dezoge wan chorkia eni ta chamal dronal chori shego mares. Chononge leten dinola 자와야 보체다 만심발라 페토드 수수고 동다 마저 yengi 체드 레가 간다지 레와 있나 동다 수수기 동다 차루 젠도 담라 론도 잘라도
So of course the teachers and the lamas are not going to tell you where you're going to go in your next life, but what they're telling you is to do things in this life, like work for the benefit of others, help others, right? Really try to work to help and benefit other people. And really, by doing this, you're actually benefiting yourself too, right? It's not simply just this sort of thing, right? So, by working to accomplish the benefit of others, you actually accomplish your own benefit, your own welfare.
아니 무심발라 chorogi gemba야 보 tobay나 takiya chimado tatsindezo tosonola jimasoso penju chimbo 아니 chibutin데 차그레스 아니 트럼스나 타고 또 들러야 보송나 야가고 참들러 있는다 곰바산이 가리는 참들러도 야보 송아이나 치치마 아니 트럼스나 딘루키스네 딘루하도 메이 공부 라 끼그레스네 어디서 그랬어
So like, for example, if you practice generosity in this life, in your future lives, and even in this life, you'll often you'll receive you'll have lots of resources. You'll have resources to use if you practice if you practice pure ethics. If you practice ethical discipline, then you'll be reborn into one of these good migrations, like it's born as a human being or born as in one of the God realms.
오다 데르티노 제기 땅아 저거 짐바스토 조바감나 아니 조바야 보가 단다 짐면서 그치 콘루 산이 지우처라나 저로 조바야 보가 틴데지나 기와치마 남바야 보틴데 기야 롱그레서 남바스나
If you practice patience in this life, right? If someone gets angry with you and you're able to practice patience and stay calm in the next life, you'll have a very attractive face. This is what they say. This is how they say. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
I was thinking this because I see that maybe many people, they don't know that they were suffering already. They're stressed with working, this business and so on, right? And then when suddenly they didn't know that they are suffering already, right? But suddenly they have a diagnosis, for example. The first thing that they say is, I'm afraid to die. That's why I'm
공기 숨박하려서 나디 녜삼수라 직진한데 밑에서 디 치라기 쉐킹기 밑에서 공송은이 체니 nga dunga mangboyo hakugiyo maris lege chegere di dunga yunayang kongso hakugiyo maris yunayang jiksina nima jik minbe kongso la di kinong shigire minbe te di sungbayana lam sang nga di tiktak mambo lepkire yang di yunayang kongso di nguni chene di kongso nguni chene miksegi jodangi dunga hakugiyo maris
딜란르 데다 예진 난즈세 디식치다 nga sewa di shikchiba susu roma도 shikchuni salo tomatuna 아니 디 주님아지 주 계서 자그래서 딘델라바이나 합디가 땅아식루레서니 자지오라 자와디 주디 지티 거기 잘라 몸볼 차진도 수수라 차지시고 지요 오늘 전에 차지지 거요 뭐 실리는 주부디도 저래마도 용용 유지로 요래서 선로 동토나
Yeah, so really, like if you think about when dying and people get afraid, right? That of course the people have worked really hard to save up all of these things and accumulate all of this wealth or possessions in this life, and of course they're really scared to be parted from that. They're also the people are very attached to this image of themselves, right? We build up this very strong image of ourselves that's attached to this body in this life, right? And so that's terrifying to let that go. But if you really understand and believe or have trust in past and future lives, you really you can see that there's nothing to hang on to, and that you're going to lose this body, but you're actually just going to get another body. So it's not so scary if you were able to understand that. Just death itself, right? Of course, we're supposed to be scared of samsara, but death itself. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you so much. I actually have to go. Our time is. Bye, Taruna. Thank you for coming, everybody online.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you.
Carlos.
Chuchina.
알레요. 다들 초반에 용게 좀만 네 디지치셔 단데 디노라 아니 주도소만 디노라 다디세 치치도 까마치즈 톨라통소 gonda샤이.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody online. We really appreciate it. Sorry that I didn't have time to say everything I wanted to say. We sort of ran out of time, but thank you so much for coming online.
아니 지 데메 알로 젤 수수기 디 콜 시나 야푼두 틴디 테와이나 아니 가족이 디 시디기 인타잔으로 도로치다 아니 가족 디 콜 아니 소치초스.
And so these Sunday talks really have different topics. So if you guys want to suggest a topic for the future Sunday talks, please in the WhatsApp group make suggestions. They're happy to have suggestions about what people are interested in hearing on for these Sunday talks.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay. Bye, guys. Thank you. Bye.
야, 안디 그소에 대해 지바래 아니 지마치 수수기 신도 디 콜 시나 딕트서나 아니 가솔라 아니 시딜라 라우다가 좀 지치나 가르치시는 가시 저거래 디미나